It all started the moment Ned Stark stood in front of the Iron Throne, holding the paper that proved Joffrey Baratheon wasn't the true heir. In the real story, Ned made a fatal mistake. He trusted Littlefinger. But not this time. In this version of the tale, Ned did something else. He remembered his instincts. He remembered what Littlefinger had done in the past, the sly looks, the way he always played both sides. And most of all, he remembered what Jon Arryn had died for the truth. So, instead of going to Petyr Baelish for help, Ned sent a raven straight to Dragonstone, to Stannis Baratheon. Ned's message was short, sharp, and honest, just like the man himself. The king is dead. Robert's children are not his. You are the rightful heir. Come to King's Landing with men. I will stand with you. He signed it with his seal, Stark of Winterfell. Then he looked at Maester Pycelle and said nothing about what he had done. Ned knew time was against him. The Lannisters were already gathering power, and the gold cloaks could turn at any moment. But he had made his choice. Stannis was cold and hard, but he was lawful, and Ned respected law. Days passed. Varys came whispering, "Lord Stark, have you considered Prince Renly? He is more loved by the people. He has the charm." But Ned shook his head. "Robert's brother Stannis is next in line. That is the law." When Renly came himself, offering support if Ned would crown him instead, Ned refused again. "I will not break the line of succession. We are not usurpers." Renly left angry, but Ned didn't care. His North honor would not bend for politics. Then, the day Robert died, everything changed. Cersei tried to take the throne for Joffrey, just like in the original story, but this time, Ned was ready. Instead of showing the fake will and trusting Littlefinger to control the City Watch, Ned had sent word to Commander Janos Slynt 2 days earlier, and this time, with a bag of gold and the authority of Stannis' name behind him. Slynt, seeing the writing on the wall and hearing that Stannis' fleet had already set sail toward Blackwater Bay, agreed. The gold cloaks stayed loyal. When Ned walked into the throne room and saw Cersei trying to crown her boy, he didn't kneel, he didn't argue. He raised his voice and said, "This boy is no true heir. I accuse Queen Cersei of treason. Guards, seize them." Cersei's face turned pale. Joffrey screamed like a child, "I am your king." But the gold cloaks surrounded them. It was over before it started. Cersei was arrested, Joffrey too. Ned didn't kill them, he was too honorable for that, but he locked them in the dungeons of the Red Keep. Tommen and Myrcella were taken into safe custody. No harm came to them. Sansa cried, begged for mercy for her prince, but Arya stood quiet, watching her father with silent trust. Ned told her, "We do what's right, even when it hurts." When Stannis arrived a few days later with his ships and banners, he was cold as ever. He looked at Ned and said, "You did what many would not. You followed the law." Ned replied, "That's all I've ever done." Stannis was crowned king in the Great Sept. He named Ned Stark as Hand of the King officially. Davos was made master of ships. And the realm, for the first time in years, had a king who actually belonged on the throne, even if no one really liked him. But not all was well. In the shadows, Tywin Lannister was gathering forces in the west, furious that his daughter and grandchildren were imprisoned. Renly fled south with Loras Tyrell, hoping to claim Highgarden support. The Game of Thrones was far from over. But this time, Ned Stark was still alive, and Winterfell still had its Warden of the North. It didn't take long for the first signs of war to reach King's Landing. Tywin Lannister, never one to forgive an insult, moved faster than most expected. Word came from the west that he had called his banners, gathered 20,000 men, and begun marching, not toward King's Landing directly, but toward the Riverlands. He wanted to draw first blood, and he did. Villages were burned, Lord Tully's lands suffered. Catelyn's younger brother Edmure was caught off guard. Robb Stark, still in Winterfell, heard of it a few days later. His mother, now back in the capital with Ned, stood in the council chambers with fire in her eyes. "They're burning my father's lands," she said. "How long will we sit and wait?" Stannis looked at her without blinking. "We are gathering strength. Let him strike first. The realm will see who the aggressor is." Ned clenched his jaw. His loyalty to Stannis was real, but when it came to Cat and the Riverlands, his patience wore thin. "I'll write to Robb," Ned said finally. "He'll march south with the northern banners. Tywin will not go unchallenged." But even as they spoke of war, darker things moved in the shadows. In the black cells beneath the Red Keep, Cersei Lannister was not broken, not even close. She sat in silence, her eyes hollow, but her mind was working. Every day she whispered poison into Sansa's ears, knowing the girl still clung to hope that her prince, her Joffrey, was innocent. "They stole his throne," Cersei said softly. "Your father and that cold-faced usurper. Stannis will never let your brother rule the north. They'll burn Winterfell when they're done with it." Sansa cried herself to sleep that night, her dreams filled with fire and screaming wolves. Meanwhile, Arya spent her days training with Syrio Forel. Ned had not stopped her. In fact, he encouraged it now. He'd seen too much betrayal and too many knights who were anything but honorable. He wanted Arya sharp, quiet, and able to defend herself. One day, Varys approached Ned alone in the Hans Solar. The spider walked with his usual soft steps and gentle voice. "My lord, something stirs across the narrow sea." Ned frowned. "What now?" "Daenerys Targaryen. She has wed the Carl of the Dothraki. Viserys is dead, but the girl is with child. And the Dothraki call it the stallion who mounts the world." Ned stared at him for a long moment. "Let her come. Westeros has enough cowards hiding behind crowns. If she wants the throne, she'll face Stannis in the light of day." But Varys only gave his thin smile. "Oh, Lord Stark, fire and blood don't wait for permission." Back in the west, Tywin had split his forces. Jaime Lannister led one host toward Riverrun. The Kingslayer wore no smile this time. He burned villages without mercy, wanting to draw Ned's attention. He wanted revenge for Cersei, for Joffrey, for his pride. Robb Stark finally crossed the neck with 20,000 Northmen. The young wolf, as they began calling him, moved swiftly. He met Roose Bolton at the Twins, and despite Walder Frey's usual arrogance, Robb secured passage with a mix of promises and threats. But the war was not just on open fields. In the dark alleys of King's Landing, gold began to flow again. Bronn, the sellsword, was approached by strange men in black cloaks. Whispers told of a plan to free Cersei, of loyal Lannister guards still hiding in the city, of Sansa, perhaps, being the key. One night, Arya caught a man creeping toward the black cells with a hidden blade. She didn't wait. She stabbed him straight through the throat. When she told her father, blood still on her hands, Ned didn't flinch. "Good," he said. "Don't tell anyone, not even your sister." Arya nodded. She never did. Meanwhile, Stannis sat the Iron Throne, but it brought him no joy. The lords whispered behind his back. The people feared him. The city did not love him, only obeyed. He ruled with justice, but without warmth. Davos remained his only true friend in the capital, while Melisandre, newly arrived, spoke to him in the shadows about flames and destiny. Ned did not trust her. He watched her eyes burn with red light and whispered to Cat, "I don't know what she is, but it's not good." And deep in the dungeons, Cersei finally smiled. She had made contact. A guard, well paid. Sansa, quietly manipulated. All she needed was a night when the city watched the skies. And that night was coming. King's Landing slept uneasily. By day, The people bowed to Stannis. They called him king. But by night, they whispered the name Joffrey, like a ghost still haunting the Red Keep. His execution had not come yet. Stannis had left him and Cersei locked away, insisting on a proper trial. But Ned knew that delay only gave the Lannisters time, and time, he'd learned, was the deadliest weapon in the Game of Thrones. Arya had changed. She rarely spoke now. After killing the would-be assassin, she'd begun following the shadows, watching servants, listening to whispers. Ned caught her once outside the great hall at midnight, her little feet silent on the cold stone. "What are you doing here?" he asked. "Looking for liars," she answered. Ned wanted to scold her, but he didn't. In truth, he was glad someone in his family still had sharp eyes. He'd played the honest man too long in a city that fed on deceit. Meanwhile, Sansa grew distant. She wouldn't eat. She barely spoke to her family. Every letter from the north brought her tears, yet she refused to leave. Cersei's poison had dug deep. Then came the fire. It happened 3 nights after a red comet appeared in the sky, fiery and long-tailed, stretching over the city like a blade. Melisandre claimed it was the sign of Azor Ahai reborn. "The Lord of Light sends a warning," she told the court. "Darkness is near." That same night, the Tower of the Hand caught fire. Ned had been in his solar when the smoke reached under his door. Arya was already screaming in the hallway. The flames licked through the stone, oily and hot. 2 guards died trying to fight it. Maester Luwin was nearly crushed under falling beams, but Ned survived. Barely. "It was wildfire," Davos said the next morning, surveying the blackened ruin. "Only Lannisters play with wildfire in the capital." Ned agreed. Cersei didn't escape that night. Her plan failed. But the message was clear. She still had allies, even inside the Red Keep. And the escape attempt had only made her more dangerous because now she had nothing left to lose. Stannis called a council meeting that morning. His face was colder than usual, his fingers clenched on the arms of the Iron Throne. Melisandre stood at his side, silent, eyes like embers. "We've shown them justice," Stannis said, voice sharp as steel. "Now they will know fear. Cersei Lannister and her son will burn before the people of this city." "No," Ned said at once. "Burning a queen and her son makes us no better than them." Stannis narrowed his eyes. "They tried to burn you, Lord Stark, you and your children." Ned stood his ground. "Let her hang. Let him face a sword. But we are not monsters." Melisandre stepped forward. "The fire is not for punishment, Lord Stark. It is for cleansing. The Red God demands—" "I don't care what your God demands," Ned growled. There was silence. Even Davos flinched. Stannis let out a slow breath. "Then we'll do it your way. For now." But Melisandre's glare told Ned she would not forget this. And neither would the flames. Meanwhile, Robb Stark finally reached the Trident. His host clashed with Jaime Lannister near the Whispering Wood, and this time victory came swift. Jaime's army was crushed, and the Kingslayer was captured. The news reached King's Landing like a thunderclap. Catelyn wept with relief. "My boy, he did it. He has Jaime." But Ned's face stayed grim. "It won't stop, Tywin." Indeed, Tywin had already begun retreating, pulling his army back toward Harrenhal. The Riverlands smoldered, but the real war had only just begun. And now, the balance had shifted. Back in the capital, Cersei made her next move. Sansa vanished. One morning, she simply wasn't in her chambers. The guards were dead, throats cut in silence. No doors broken, no screams heard. Ned searched the entire castle. He didn't sleep for 2 days. Arya stayed by his side, stone-faced, but her eyes betrayed her fear. Then came the letter, written in Sansa's handwriting, delivered by a Lannister loyalist, and sealed with a lion. Father, I'm with the Queen. She was right. You never loved Joffrey. You only wanted power for yourself. I will not return." Ned crumpled the paper in his fist. He didn't speak for hours. That night, he stood in the godswood alone, his sword ice buried in the ground before him. "I came here to do the right thing," he whispered to the old weirwood tree, "and the gods punished me for it." But the wind offered no answer, only silence. And somewhere beneath the city, Cersei finally laughed. The mood in King's Landing shifted like a dying animal, slow at first, then full of panic. Sansa's disappearance shook the court. Whispers spread faster than wildfire. Some said she was kidnapped. Others claimed she'd eloped with a Lannister guard. The most dangerous rumors, though, accused Ned himself that he'd locked her away after she refused to denounce Joffrey. Ned did nothing to quiet the noise. He didn't care what the lords muttered behind closed doors. His daughter was gone, and every second she stayed with Cersei, she was drifting further into the lion's den. Arya tried to comfort him, but she was just a child. A dagger in her hand and fire in her eyes, yes, but still a child. Ned watched her practicing alone in the yard and felt something twist inside him. This wasn't what he'd wanted for her, any of them. In the small council meetings, tension boiled just beneath the surface. Melisandre had grown bolder, her red robes and riddles trailing behind her like smoke. She spoke often now of sacrifice, of cleansing the capital of shadows. And Stannis listened. Ned saw it. The king he had helped crown the man of law and order was slipping toward something darker. Fire worship, dreams of prophecy, a throne held not by right, but by fear. When Ned raised concern about the missing Sansa, Melisandre merely smiled. If the girl has joined the Queen, then she has chosen her side. Fire will reveal the truth in all things. Davos Seaworth stayed silent through most meetings now. The Onion Knight had seen enough men burned alive at Dragonstone to know where this was heading. He found Ned alone one evening, staring at the skull of a long-dead Targaryen dragon in the crypts beneath the Red Keep. "Lord Stark," Davos said quietly, "you and I both know justice and madness wear the same face in this city." Ned didn't respond for a while. Then he said, "If Stannis becomes the thing we swore to fight, what do we do?" Davos looked down. "Then I suppose we'll have to break our oaths, again." But before they could act, another wave hit. Robb sent ravens. He'd pushed Tywin Lannister back to Harrenhal, but couldn't hold the Riverlands alone. Walder Frey was demanding more. He wanted a marriage alliance. And Roose Bolton was acting strange, quiet, too quiet. Ned knew that silence all too well. The North was loyal, but even loyalty had limits when blood was spilled in the South. To make matters worse, news from the East arrived like a storm on the horizon. Daenerys Targaryen had survived the Red Wastes. Her husband, Khal Drogo, was dead, but the girl had walked into his funeral pyre and emerged alive, with dragons. Varys delivered the news with a pale face. 3 of them, small for now but alive, hatched in fire. "She is no ordinary girl, my lord." Ned listened, stone-faced. "She's across the sea," he said finally, "and we've got enough madness here already." But in truth, he feared it. He feared what fire-breathing creatures would do to a kingdom already burning. And then came Cersei's strike. During a feast meant to celebrate the unification of Baratheon loyalists, a scream echoed through the great hall. A servant ran in, bleeding from the mouth, poisoned. Another guard collapsed just outside the kitchens. The meat had been laced with something foul. Melisandre claimed the Red God had warned her in the flames. "There is a traitor within the court," she said, "a serpent close to your heart." Stannis looked directly at Ned. "My king," Ned said calmly, "you can't believe I had anything to do with this." "I believe nothing," Stannis replied. But the fire sees everything. The next morning, half the kitchen staff was arrested. One confessed under torture to having taken coin from someone who wore gold and smelled of lion's perfume. Cersei's influence was spreading again, but this time it wasn't just poison she sent. A raven came, a letter, no seal, only a single line written in a soft hand that once scribbled letters to Winterfell in the snow. I saw the flames. They showed me who my true family is. It was Sansa, or someone pretending to be her. Ned crushed the paper, his fingers shaking. He stood that night on the highest balcony of Maegor's Holdfast, wind biting his face. Arya stood beside him, silent. "You still trust Stannis?" she asked him, voice small. He thought for a long moment before answering. "I trust him to do what's right," he said, then paused. "And sometimes that's what scares me the most." The Iron Throne was colder than it looked, a jagged thing of blades and fury, and Stannis Baratheon sat on it like a man welded to iron. He didn't speak much these days. He stared more, watched the court as though weighing souls instead of listening to words. When he did speak, his voice was colder than snow and harder than steel. "Burn the traitors," he said now, without lifting his eyes. "Every last one." The man accused a stable boy from Flea Bottom, who had confessed to letting a Lannister spy into the keep, cried as they dragged him away. Ned wanted to stop it. He almost opened his mouth. But Melisandre stood too close, and when she turned to him, her eyes glowed red, like the coals of a dying fire, and he remembered something she once said: "Even ice can melt if the fire burns long enough." The people cheered when the flames roared, not out of love, but fear. Fear was the only thing that truly ruled King's Landing now. Not honor, not loyalty, just fear and fire. Ned Stark watched the boy burn. His fists clenched, the smell of flesh was thick in the air. Davos stood beside him and whispered, "This isn't justice." Ned whispered back, "It's vengeance pretending to be law." And still, the fires rose. That night, ravens brought more news. Robb had won again. Another skirmish near the Red Fork. Sir Adam Marbrand had been taken prisoner, and Harrenhal was under siege. But Roose Bolton had taken command of the siege lines, and Ned didn't trust Roose Bolton. He didn't like the way the man never blinked, never smiled, never bled. There was something about him that felt like a blade, always hidden just out of sight. And worse, Walder Frey had sent a demand. He wanted Robb married to one of his daughters, or no more crossing the twins. Ned stared at the parchment in his chambers that evening. His hands trembled slightly, something that hadn't happened since the war with the Mad King. Catelyn entered, reading his face. "What is it?" He showed her. She read it, lips thinning. "If Robb refuses—" "He won't refuse," Ned said. "He knows what's at stake. He's my son." But deep down, he knew Robb might already be in too deep. He'd heard rumors whispered through Varys's little birds that Robb had fallen for some girl in the Westerlands, that his heart had already made a promise the North couldn't afford. And then came the worst blow. A package, delivered at dawn, wrapped in silk. Arya opened it before the guards could stop her. Inside, a lock of red gold hair, tied with Sansa's ribbon, and a note in a smooth, practiced hand. "A token of thanks for letting your daughter burn her last bridge." Ned didn't speak for hours. He sent Arya to her room, though she fought him with everything she had. "Let me go after her," she screamed. "Let me kill her. I'm not a little girl." He grabbed her arms. "You are my daughter." She glared up at him, teeth gritted. "So is she." And then Arya ran. That night she was gone from the tower. Her sword was missing too. The guards swore they'd find her. But Ned knew Arya didn't want to be found. She had her own hunt now. And while the Starks fell apart, the flames kept growing. In the Sept of Baelor, Melisandre had begun holding nightly prayers. Nobles were invited, urged to burn offerings, to kneel in red light and chant in a language no one understood. Stannis never attended. But he didn't stop it either. Ned confronted him. "This is not the realm we swore to protect." Stannis looked up from his maps. "It's the realm that exists, not the one you dream about in the north. She wants to burn the old gods. She wants to burn anyone who doesn't kneel to her flames. She has seen victory in fire. She sees what she wants," Ned growled, "and you're letting her lead you into madness." Stannis stood slowly. "You want to lead the kingdom, Lord Stark? Then take the throne. Go on. Sit on it. Let's see if it doesn't cut you." Ned didn't respond. He turned and walked out. The Iron Throne didn't need to cut him. The realm already was. That night he sat alone in the Godswood, the only place in King's Landing that still felt alive. The old weirwood tree stood silent, white bark, red leaves, watching. He prayed, not for justice. He prayed for his children. He prayed for Winterfell. And across the city, in a hidden cellar beneath a burned-down shop, Arya Stark slipped a blade into a Lannister guard's throat and whispered, "Valar Morghulis." Arya Stark moved like a whisper in the dark. No guards saw her, no servants remembered her face. She'd traded her noble clothes for rags and dust, her name for silence. To the city, she was just another orphan girl. But her eyes stayed sharp, and her list had begun to grow. 3 names. 3 people who helped steal her sister. 3 who bowed to the lion and betrayed the wolf. She had already taken one. The next was a knight, Sir Harys Barnett, one of the Lannister loyalists still hiding inside the Red Keep. Arya watched him for days, hiding in shadows, watching where he drank, where he walked, where he stumbled when drunk. She followed him to a brothel on the edge of Flea Bottom. And that night, when he stepped into the alley behind the building to relieve himself, Arya struck. She didn't scream. She didn't hesitate. The blade went in clean, just under his ribs. He gasped, eyes wide, seeing nothing but a dirty-faced girl with cold grey eyes. "For Sansa," she whispered, and left him bleeding in the dark. Back in the castle, no one knew what Arya was doing, not even Ned. He spent his days wrestling with fire and steel. The court had become a battlefield of silent threats and loud prayers. Melisandre's red faith was spreading through the city like a sickness. She promised protection from the dragons, from the Targaryens, from the old gods and their wooden trees. "Fire will save you," she told the lords. "Only fire burns away the lies." And Stannis, he wasn't the same man anymore. He rarely spoke to Ned, and when he did, it was short, stiff, and filled with suspicion. Davos was the only voice left whispering caution, but even his words were starting to lose their weight. Then came another letter. This time from Roose Bolton. Robb had fallen in love, and not with a Frey. He had married a Westerling girl, defying Walder Frey's demands. And worse, Roose wrote with a chilling tone, the Freys had begun to mutter about betrayal. Insult. Revenge. Ned stared at the words in disbelief. Not just for the content, but for how they were written. Not a warning, not grief, not fury. Just cold observation, calculated, clean. He read it aloud to Catelyn in their chamber. She closed her eyes and whispered, "The Freys will never forgive this. The North is in danger." Ned didn't answer. He just looked at the words again, knowing deep down what Roose Bolton might do if things turned. And then, finally, Sansa returned. She was brought in under Lannister guard, not as a prisoner, not as a traitor, but as a guest of the court. Her face was pale, her hair longer, her voice was softer, older somehow. She walked with a kind of forced grace, like someone wearing clothes that didn't fit anymore. "I came of my own will," she told Stannis. "I wish only to be with my family." But Ned saw the lie in her eyes. He knew Cersei had carved her into something else. Not a queen, not a fighter. Something in between, a mask of a lady, hiding wounds she wouldn't show. When Arya found out, she broke her silence and stormed into the tower. "That's not Sansa," she shouted. "That's a Lannister crow dressed in a Stark dress." Sansa stared at her sister. "You always hated me. You always betrayed us." "Joffrey was murdered," Sansa cried suddenly, "burned like a dog in a cage." "He deserved worse," Arya hissed. Ned stepped between them, his voice like thunder. Enough. But he knew nothing would ever be enough now. The wolf pack was broken, and each one of his children had become something darker than before. That night, Melisandre came to him with a vision. "I saw the north in flames," she said. "A wedding drenched in blood, wolves dying in cages of steel." Ned didn't answer. She stepped closer. "Your gods are silent, mine are not." He looked at her, face hard. "If what you say is true, then I'll burn the whole kingdom to stop it." Melisandre smiled. And across the sea, under a red moon, a silver-haired girl stepped out of the fire, her dragon screaming into the sky. Daenerys Targaryen had received word of King Robert's death, of Stannis' rise, of war in Westeros. She whispered to her dragons, "They killed my father, they hunted my brother, now they'll see what a dragon's daughter can do." Fire was coming, and Westeros would drown in it unless a Stark could find a way to stop both kings and queens from burning the realm down with them. Ned Stark didn't sleep that night. He stood in the Tower of the Hand, overlooking the city, the sky painted red by torchlight and the flames of Melisandre's nightly blessing. He watched the fire dance in the wind like it was mocking him, taunting him with every choice he'd made since Robert's death. Sansa was home, but she wasn't whole. Arya was slipping further into shadows, and he didn't know how to pull her back. Robb had married for love, and now Walder Frey was sharpening his knives. And worse, news had come from the Wall. Benjen Stark was missing, and the dead, the real dead, were walking beyond the frost fangs. Samwell Tarly's letter had been desperate, filled with trembling ink and warnings of white-eyed corpses that did not stay buried. But no one in King's Landing listened. "Let the North freeze," Lord Gunser Sunglass had said in council. "We fight real wars in the south." And Melisandre, always calm, only replied, "The night is long, but fire is eternal." Ned was tired of fire. That same night, Varys slipped into his chambers, moving like a shadow behind a curtain. He spoke softly, as always. "There is a plot, Lord Stark, not in the shadows anymore, in the halls, in plain sight." Ned turned from the window. "What kind of plot?" "A red one, with golden teeth." Varys explained it all, or enough to make Ned feel sick. Tywin Lannister hadn't gone into hiding. He'd been negotiating with the Freys, and not just them. A raven had flown to Dawn, another to the Reach. The Lannisters were building something bigger, not just revenge, a return. And Cersei, despite her confinement, had been writing her own letters hidden behind smiles and a lady's charm. Sansa had delivered more than loyalty. She had delivered strategy. She'd remembered names, alliances, weaknesses. "She's not your daughter anymore," Varys said quietly. Ned stared at him for a long moment. "She's still my blood." Varys didn't argue. Blood is not always loyal. That morning, Arya returned, face bruised, blade bloodied. "I found the third one," she said to her father. "He was hiding in the sept, praying." Ned didn't ask what she did to him. He didn't want to know. Arya stood straighter now. She looked older, colder. "I'm doing what you can't," she told him. "And the worst part?" She was right. The court was slipping. Stannis was slipping. The fire worshippers had begun arresting people for refusing the light. Noble families fled the capital. Markets were closing. The Red Keep now held more prisoners than bannermen. Ned knew what came next. He'd seen it in Aerys's reign. When kings grew paranoid, the executions came faster than words. And then it happened. During a feast in the throne room, Lord Selwyn Tarth was dragged screaming from his seat, accused of Lannister sympathies for refusing to burn an old sept in his home isle. Melisandre demanded fire. Ned rose. He is innocent. Stannis didn't move. He stared at the Iron Throne as if it spoke louder than Ned did. Melisandre raised her hand, and the guards obeyed. Selwyn Tarth was burned alive in the courtyard as the bells tolled midnight. And for the first time, Ned Stark drew his greatsword, the one he hadn't touched since Robert's death, and he stood between Melisandre and the next accused man. "No more fire," he growled. "No more smoke and screaming." The court froze. Even Stannis looked at him with something between confusion and warning. "Step aside, Lord Stark," Melisandre said, red flames dancing in her eyes. But Ned didn't. He lowered his voice. "If you take another man like this, I'll drag you into the snow myself." The room held its breath. And Stannis, after a long moment, finally said, "Enough." Melisandre said nothing. But the way she looked at Ned, it was no longer just fire. It was fury. Later that night, Catelyn found her husband in the Godswood again, whispering to the weirwood tree. "We have to leave," she said, "before she turns the city against you." Ned nodded slowly. "I've sent word to Robb. If the Freys betray him, if Bolton turns, he must retreat to Winterfell. He must hold the north." Catelyn's voice shook. "And what of us?" "I'll stay," Ned said. "Someone has to hold this kingdom together." But deep down, he knew it was already falling apart. And far in the north, at a wedding with music and wine, Roose Bolton watched Robb Stark dance with his young bride and whispered 4 words into the air. "The Lannisters send their regards." The raven came at dawn, blood on its wings, a broken seal hanging from its leg. Ned Stark opened the letter with trembling fingers, though in his heart he already knew. Robb Stark, dead. Catelyn Stark, dead. Bannermen slaughtered. The twins burned. The words were scrawled in haste, likely written in terror as the last man fled a massacre. The signature wasn't from Roose Bolton. It wasn't from Walder Frey. It wasn't signed at all. Just a final line written in crimson ink. Winter came, and it bled. Ned couldn't speak. He stood in silence, the letter crumpled in his hand, his body frozen as if the north itself had wrapped around his spine. His son, his boy, who marched to protect his people, his mother, his name murdered, slaughtered at a feast like cattle at a butcher's block. Arya found him in the Godswood hours later. He hadn't moved. She didn't speak. She didn't cry. She simply placed needle in his hand and whispered, "I want names." But Ned had no names left to give, only ashes. That night, the city roared with celebration. Melisandre declared it a victory of the Red God. "The traitor wolf has fallen," she said, "and now only the righteous remain." Stannis said nothing. He stood at the throne, one hand clenched on the pommel of his sword, the other wrapped in a red cloth, burned from a vision ritual Melisandre had forced him to endure days before. The fire had taken something from him, maybe his will, maybe his soul. Varys whispered to Ned as the bells rang. "They're coming. The Tyrells, the Martells. They're aligning behind a girl across the sea." Ned looked up, dead-eyed. "Daenerys?" Varys nodded. 3 dragons, thousands of freed slaves, and more loyalty than gold can buy. The realm remembers the fire and the Targaryen name. Ned breathed in slowly. Then we must prepare. But there was nothing to prepare. Stannis was not listening anymore. Melisandre's whispers filled his ears day and night, and her flames showed him a future of blood and conquest. She promised him victory if he made one final sacrifice. A king's blood must pay for a king's crown, she said. And her red eyes turned toward Gendry, the last of Robert Baratheon's bastards. Ned stood in their way. "You kill that boy, and I will take your head myself," he warned. But Stannis only said, "You once said the law matters, Stark. The blood of the king runs in him. His blood has power." Ned spat at his feet. "And yours doesn't?" That night, Ned freed Gendry and sent him north on a ship Davos provided. Melisandre knew it, of course, but by the time she sent her flame searching, the boy was gone. She didn't speak to Ned again. But she didn't need to, because something else was coming. The sky above the narrow sea turned red one morning, not from fire, but from wings. Dragons. 3 of them. Daenerys Targaryen had landed in Dorne with a force greater than anyone expected. The Martells had bent the knee. The Tyrells, bitter over being pushed aside by Stannis' regime, had sent gold, grain, and swords. Even the Stormlands were rumbling with whispers of rebellion. Ned met with Varys in the crypts once more. "She's not her father," the spider said, "but she is fire." Ned whispered, "And what are we, Varys? Ice?" "I prefer secrets." Then came the final decision. Ned stood before the small council, what was left of it. The throne room was colder now. Even the firelight felt hollow. He looked at Stannis, pale and stiff. Melisandre behind him, smiling like a flame that knew it would burn the world. "I will not stand behind this crown," Ned said. "Silence. I followed you because I believed in law, in honor. But there's no honor left in your court, only fire and ash." He turned and began to walk, but Stannis' voice stopped him. "You would abandon your post, now, when the dragons are at the gate?" Ned turned slowly. "No, I'll face them. But not for you." He looked around the throne room, not at Stannis, not at Melisandre, but at the people watching from the shadows, at the guards, the servants, the small folk. "I'll face them for them." And he left. He and Arya rode north the next morning, cloaks drawn, hearts heavy, no banners, no ceremony, just wolves returning home. As they passed the gates, a raven soared overhead, its feathers black as coal, its eyes like frozen stars. It carried a message from Castle Black. The dead are walking. And Ned Stark knew. The Game of Thrones was over. The real war had just begun.